Why Cena? Why? What's going on, guys? Welcome back to an all-new episode of WrestleRant Ranks here on the channel, where I, Graham Giason Matthews, do tier lists and rankings. Last week, we did all the Dwayne Johnson movies that I've seen, and probably I would have bumped that back had I recorded that episode after last week's epic show-closing angle at Elimination Chamber, where for the first time in 20 years since becoming a main eventer in WWE, John Cena turned heel. Hell froze over when he aligned with The Rock and betrayed Cody Rhodes. Quite the show-closing angle at Elimination Chamber last weekend. So instead, on that Monday, because I recorded that episode before Elimination Chamber, I'm sitting here talking about the fucking Rock's movies like that really gives him, like that really fucking matters. You know what I'm saying? So today, we're going to be talking about that John Cena heel turn. And I got a request to do, top babyface turns and heel turns and rank those here on the channel. I think that'd be interesting at some point. That didn't really jump out to me, just because I had just done a Bleach Report article about a week ago, actually, ranking the biggest heel turns in WWE history. And that's an article over on Bleach Report. You can check it out. So you can check that out in article form. Today, instead, what I thought would be better, because this was the first thing running through my mind after Elimination Chamber last week. For as excellent as the execution of the angle was, where John Cena turned heel, my initial thought was, one, it doesn't really make sense, and I was saying that prior to the pay-per-view. It is quite cool, and I am optimistic this could turn out to be something great, depending on the follow-up, if they can make sense of it. Hopefully not turning Cena back babyface by WrestleMania, which is a very real concern right now among fans. We have to wait and see where it goes. But I am optimistic it will be maybe not everything that we've expected it to be over the years, but at least will be something different. And if nothing else, making that match with Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania 41 for the undisputed WWE Championship infinitely more interesting. But anyway, so when John Cena turns heel, I'm kind of confused as to why it would make sense or why it doesn't make sense. And I am also excited. But one of my other initial thoughts was, this really should have happened a long fucking time ago. I would have been breaking windows, jumping through windows, freaking out in the timeline, had John Cena turn heel a lot sooner than he did. And we're talking 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I started watching WWE in 2008. There were opportunities prior to even that point to turn John Cena heel, most notably probably at One Night Stand 2006. That would have robbed, no pun intended, robbed Van Dam of his moment on that show, becoming WWE champion, had John Cena turn heel that night and retain the title in front of that vengeful crowd of the Hammerstein Ballroom at One Night Stand 06. Did I say One Night Stand 06 earlier? I think I said One Night Stand 08. But regardless, there were a few opportunities at that point to turn John Cena heel. To me, there were several chances, perfect opportunities that presented themselves to turn John Cena heel. And he's talked about it before in past interviews, when it would have made sense, when they even planned to do it. And then Vince McMahon, of course, got cold feet. And we'll talk about that one instance a little bit later on. But there were actually multiple opportunities to turn John Cena heel, and they did not. So I thought it would be only fitting on today's episode of WrestleRant Ranks to run down those instances where I feel they should have turned John Cena heel. Starting with this very first one. This is right after WrestleMania 36. This is the most recent example on this list, and it's worth mentioning for one very legitimate reason. At WrestleMania 36, John Cena ran it back with Bray Wyatt, a.k.a. The Fiend, really. It was really more of The Fiend than Bray Wyatt himself, but it was the Firefly Funhouse match. One of the better parts of a fairly dire Mania due to the fact there were no fans. They got creative with the cinematic matches with Cena and Wyatt, as well as AJ Styles and The Undertaker. But the Firefly Funhouse match was not only a nice nod to their prior Mania match 6 years earlier at WrestleMania 2014, but it also kind of gave us a glimpse of what could have been with John Cena as a heel. Maybe not exactly what you're looking at in this picture, and if you haven't seen this before, you obviously haven't seen the Firefly Funhouse match, but this is a real picture that exists. They had filmed this during the Firefly Funhouse match when Bray Wyatt was kind of playing up the idea of John Cena going heel or being the big bad guy that everyone wanted him to be by specifically joining or leading the NWO. A surreal image for those of us that thought at one point in time they might either resurrect the NWO or do a similar angle to the New World Order in WCW, but instead do it in WWE with John Cena, a part of it many years ago. Obviously, that never happened. That never materialized, maybe even for the better. But we got a glimpse of that in that Firefly Funhouse match. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, are you suggesting that Cena should have brought back the NWO after WrestleMania 36? Of course not. But what I'm saying is, Bray Wyatt beat John Cena in whatever that was supposed to be in that match, or cinematic spectacle or whatever you want to call it. The Fiend, prior to that point and after that point, affected everyone that beat him. I know Karrion Kross has kind of had that new vibe now where anyone that feuds with Karrion Kross comes off, different after the fact, whether they become more intense or turn heel. It's usually the latter. Not everyone that has feuded with Karrion Kross has turned heel, but Shinsuke Nakamura did at one point, AJ Styles did, Drew McIntyre did, The New Day even just recently. Obviously, Rey Mysterio didn't, but my point still stands. The Fiend did that first. Bray Wyatt, when he had initially turned into the Fiend, everyone that he locked in the mandible claw on or had feuded with came away from those feuds different. Daniel Bryan did, Seth Rollins did, among many other people that he was programmed with in 2019, 2020, 2021. And John Cena was among those people. John Cena, did not come back different. John Cena came back the exact same way, exactly a little over a year later, in time for his Money in the Bank match with Roman Reigns, or rather his Money in the Bank return heading into SummerSlam 2021. But had John Cena come back very different as a heel, it would have played off the fact that Bray Wyatt affected him after all. John Cena was not seen in WWE after Bray Wyatt quote-unquote beat him at WrestleMania 36 for well over a year. You could have played up the fact that Cena started to doubt himself. He was coming back a different man. He was coming back either desperate, which is what we're seeing now play out on WWE television, but either a flat-out heel or kind of leaning more heelish. Instead, he was right back to being John Cena at Money in the Bank 2021 when he showed up being his usual old self, which got a great reaction and made for a fun feud with Roman Reigns that summer. But what if? And you can apply that question to really anything I'm about to talk about on this list. But what if John Cena came back from that Firefly Funhouse match different than he was before? Bray Wyatt that same summer never came back. After Mania 37, he lost to Randy Orton at that WrestleMania. He disappeared from WWE television. He got fired anyway, literally right around the time that John Cena came back to television in the summer of 2021. So they were never going to acknowledge the fact that Cena had lost to Bray Wyatt a year and a half earlier. People probably forgot about that soon after it happened anyway. But it would have been fun to revisit for that reason alone. Number 5 on my list is from 2014. Now, 2013 to 2014 was dominated in WWE by The Authority, and very much for the worse. The Authority initially had some buzz and momentum around it. I was very excited when Randy Orton went heel and became the poster child for The Authority early on, when Triple H turned heel to lead the faction on television. Vince McMahon wasn't really involved all that much. Stephanie was alongside Triple H. And then the more time went on, it just became, just repetitive segment after repetitive segment, repetitive angle, and it just completely killed the quality of Raw for like a solid year. And even without The Authority, Raw probably would have suffered anyway, but it was much, much worse during the Authority days of late 2013 and for the better part of 2014. Even after Daniel Bryan gave them their comeuppance at WrestleMania 30, Raw went back immediately soon afterward to being a very fucking boring show to sit through. An absolute chore to watch that show was Raw in 2014. So anyway, we get to the end of 2014. They are actually doing what I would consider a very, very strong build for Survivor Series 2014 for the first time in a long time, making their classic elimination matches, which I miss, by the way, at Survivor Series matter. The Authority had abused their power time and time again. In the main event of Survivor Series 2014, they were going to do the Authority and their appointed individuals and people that were either in the Authority or aligned with the Authority or people that the Authority made favors to around that time, whether it be Rusev or Mark Henry, whatever, Luke Harper, against John Cena and 4 picked people that he picked to take on the Authority. And if John Cena's team won, the Authority would be gone from WWE. But if the Authority's team won, and they added the stipulation right before the pay-per-view actually, which was interesting, a nice wrinkle to the match, because there weren't any stakes for the Authority. If the Authority won, everyone on John Cena's team would have been fired except for John Cena, which was an interesting wrinkle because John Cena in storyline, let's face it, had been fired or quit WWE many times, and he never actually left. He was always fucking there. That probably happened 2 to 3 times prior to this point. So you knew John Cena wasn't actually going to leave. You knew people that were on Cena's team were also not going to get legitimately released, obviously. But it did add some stakes where Cena, if he lost, he would let his team down, which was interesting. But they quickly moved away from that by having John Cena's team win, which made for an amazing moment. Dolph Ziggler is the sole survivor. Sting debuting, still one of my favorite Survivor Series moments of all time. But what if, instead of it was Big Show turning on Team Cena, which ended up happening, and thankfully Cena's team won anyway, what if it was John Cena who betrayed his own team to ensure that they got fired and he was the one who he was the one who sold out to the Authority? That would have made a whole ton of sense. Considering that people already saw Cena as the corporate champion anyway, it would have made for this amazing fucking shocker at Survivor Series where the rest of his teammates get fired, he stays put, and now Dolph Ziggler can still become a big babyface after that, even if he doesn't win on that night. You can bring them back at some point anyway. But what really didn't make sense about the storyline, you can argue, oh, okay, well, Cena's team won, and then, that Authority moment of them getting fired and Ziggler's big win and Sting debuts, this big triumphant moment, was worth it. Well, in reality, yeah, in a moment, in a vacuum, it was amazing. The immediate follow-up sucked. The Authority was gone from WWE for all of a fucking month. And I guess the little wrinkle in the contract was John Cena was the only person that could bring back the Authority. He brought back the Authority a literal month later, not willingly, which would have made for a great heel turn. Even if you did not do the heel turn on that show, you could have done it, soon after, a month later, a couple of months later, where he, doesn't like a WWE where the Authority's not around. You could have fucking made up some sort of reason for why it would have made sense. But instead, he brought back the Authority because Rollins was about to cripple Edge, who was still retired at that point. He was about to hit the curb stomp on him. He didn't end up doing it because John Cena agreed, Rollins was a part of the Authority previously before they got fired in storyline. He agreed to bring back the Authority. And then he did. And that was it. That was it. That was the grand payoff to that program, which was fucking awful. They ended up firing in storyline Ziggler anyway. I don't think Cena got fired. Or I think even if he did get fired, I think the people on Team Cena got fired regardless. They needed to fight to get their jobs back a couple of weeks later. It was just complete bullshit booking. Everything about the Authority, for the most part, from late 2013, aside from their initial debut at SummerSlam that year, all the way through like 2015, 2016 was god fucking awful. A lot of it was really, really bad. They could have made it fun had they turned Cena heel instead. I know they already had Orton in the group and Seth Rollins, but you could replace either guy with Cena or just put Cena in the group. And I think that would have made a whole lot of sense considering people already perceive Cena, like I said earlier, as the corporate guy anyway. Number 4 on my list is when John Cena joined, again, quote-unquote, the Nexus in late 2010. John Cena feuding with the Nexus dominated the entire second half of 2010. They debuted by attacking John Cena in CM Punk, among other people, Justin Roberts infamously. But John Cena was one of their first big victims the night that they debuted in June of 2010. It was an amazing moment. And the immediate follow-up was actually pretty well done. They were a new thing on the block, and they were getting good heat, attacking Bret Hart, Ricky Steamboat, and, they were not really racking up wins, but it was more about the novelty of it. People called it a knockoff NWO, and these guys were not nearly as established. Obviously, there was not a single Hulk Hogan in that fucking picture that you're looking at right now, of course. But even still, it was a fresh concept at a time where Raw desperately needed it. The product was suffering. And Cena was a great foil for them because he was the poster child of the company anyway. He was the face of WWE. So them going after him made sense. And it had some promise when Cena and Wade, obviously we all know about the SummerSlam match where Cena completely fucking buried those guys, and that killed the Nexus's momentum from that point forward. But they did have an opportunity to kind of make good on that when Wade and John Cena went one-on-one at Hell in a Cell 2010. A lot of people forget about this, but they had a match on that show. If Cena won, Nexus was gone. But if Wade won, Cena would have to join the Nexus. I was kind of reserved to the fact that Cena would win and we would just move on because he already fucking buried the group anyway at SummerSlam. So at that point, just put the final nail in the coffin. We would get that final nail in the coffin a couple of months later, but they just delayed the inevitable. But they had a very cool opportunity here. And again, I'm repeating myself because every opportunity on this list would have been a cool opportunity. But John Cena lost to Wade Barrett. He was forced to join the Nexus, even wearing the Nexus colors shortly before Survivor Series. It took him a whole fucking month to wear the Nexus colors. The first and only time I think he wore the Nexus shirt was right before Survivor Series where they did a match between Wade and Orton for the WWE title. This was literally like a month and a half later. They had one pay-per-view in between then when Cena and David Otunga, another member of Nexus, won the tag team titles. And then the follow-up was complete garbage. They dropped the belts to Slater and Gabriel. They had to lay down for them. That was kind of interesting. They didn't really capitalize on the fact that John Cena was in this group. So instead, they rushed to the end game where Cena would either help Wade win the WWE Championship, or if he helped Orton win the WWE Championship as the special guest referee, he would be fired. So that's exactly what happened. He helped Orton win. He was fired from WWE. And stop me if you've heard this before, it was very short lived. It did not last long. A lot like the Authority a couple of years later, Cena's firing, quote unquote, from WWE lasted all of a fucking month. He was brought back to WWE at TLC 2010. I think he either got his job back by beating Barrett at TLC in that chairs match, or he was appointed back to the roster a couple of days before at the Slammy Awards. I forget which one. But either way, the outcome was the same. He beat Barrett. That was the end of Barrett pretty much as a top main eventer in WWE. Barrett's, I believe, final main event in WWE. Aside from Royal Rumbles and stuff like that. But as a main eventer, his days were done. And John Cena triumphantly stood tall. Where at a time, where in other instances where I get to, or where I've talked about on this list, like with the Authority one, if Cena turned heel, they didn't really have a whole lot of people to replace Cena as the top babyface in 2014. I mean, Daniel Bryan was a great option, but Bryan wasn't back yet. Ziggler was an option, but they were never really going to go with him as the face of the company. So you had Bryan. In 2010, Randy Orton was right fucking there, bro. Randy Orton was so over in 2010. I don't want to say he was Stone Cold levels of over, but he was pretty fucking close. I mean, that might sound completely egregious to say, but Stone Cold was so, or rather Randy Orton, was so amazingly over in 2010, you could have afforded to reverse the roles, like Rock and Austin in 2001, which was a dumb decision in retrospect, but whether it be 99 or 01, whatever, something that those two rivalries had in common, at the very least anyway, was that Cena was so over in his role and Orton was so over in his role that you could reverse the two and it would still work out well. Now, the aftermath of the Austin turn in 01 was garbage. That's a different story. But Cena turning heel in 2010 would have allowed Orton to take that top spot and be the top babyface in WWE. That would have been incredible. But they squandered that opportunity, as you would expect. Number 3 on the list actually comes in late 2011. Now, this is the famed instance where WWE was supposed to turn John Cena heel. And this was right before WrestleMania 2012, WrestleMania 28, the first match with The Rock. The Rock had already cost John Cena the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 27, which was not a heel turn for The Rock. People were actually happy that Rock did that because Cena was already, a polarizing figure. Everyone loved The Rock, whatever. The Rock did not turn heel by doing that, but allowed The Miz to retain the championship on that night. So they continued to talk shit about each other on social media largely. Rock disappeared from the product. Aside from one birthday episode of Raw where it fell on his birthday and they brought him in to, wish him happy birthday and whatever. Aside from that, Rock was not on the show at all until like November. He showed up for a couple of appearances where Cena was dealing with the Awesome Truth at the time. And there was this great angle that I thought had a lot of momentum and potential with Awesome Truth playing up the idea of a conspiracy in WWE. Kevin Nash, which was very weird, but he was also kind of involved with it, blaming Triple H. And Triple H, I don't know if this was ever the plan, but it seemed like to me, Triple H, before the Authority was ever a thing, Triple H could have been behind it. He could have been the head honcho behind that group. Whether Kevin Nash was involved or not, Triple H could have been the top heel as an Authority-esque figure because he was a part-timer by that point anyway, kind of taking up the spot in the Authority that he had a couple of years later, like I said. Nash being involved, probably would have been short-lived. But that really would have helped the Punk Triple H feud because Triple H would have been a definitive heel. He beat Punk when it made absolutely no sense. But again, separate story for a different day. With Cena, we go back to Cena here. Cena and Rock teamed up at Survivor Series 2011 at Madison Square Garden against Awesome Truth. On paper, who really gives a shit? But Awesome Truth were great heels at that point. They were very entertaining. They were getting great heat. They got fired in storyline. A lot of people getting fired here. At Hell in the Cell 2011. I think they were brought back. I forgot what the stipulation was or whatever. But they made life hell for John Cena. That cost him the WWE Championship in a rematch with Del Rio at Vengeance a couple weeks later. So that led to this tag team match at Survivor Series. The match itself wasn't really anything to write home about. It was Rock's first match in, I think, 7 years since WrestleMania 20, the mixed tag team match at WrestleMania 20. It wasn't a singles match. Kind of got him back in the ring before the big match in Mania, which was cool. Also fell, not on the exact date, but Survivor Series 96 to Survivor Series 2011, 15 years from when The Rock debuted, so it was a great anniversary show. I remember really enjoying that show, but my hype level for the show, honestly, a lot of it fell on the fact that Cena could turn heel, and it would have made sense. It would have made sense. I don't know about the Triple H involvement, but you could have done Cena. I know the Awesome Truth already attacked Cena prior to that point, but you could have made sense of it. Said that he sold out to join them. Big conspiracy. Cena was already going to get booed in Miami anyway at WrestleMania 28. It didn't fucking matter. People loved The Rock. You did not have to do babyface and babyface for that first match. I'll get to more of Rock related stuff in a second as far as the Cena heel turn goes. But the reports and the rumors of Cena going heel in 2012, brother, it would have made perfect sense. He already had the music made, the gear made, and everything. And I just feel like if there was any one moment to do it, because The Rock wasn't really around after that, would you have turned Cena heel without Rock being there? I mean, you could have, but a lot like when Punk went heel in 2012, which they didn't have to do that because a lot of people still liked Punk at that point. He turned heel on The Rock for a reason. The Rock was the most beloved figure in WWE at that point in time, and not hard to see why. The roster was kind of depleted, and he was a massive star even then. So it made sense. You could have had Cena and Rock win the tag team match against Awesome Truth, or Cena never tags in, or whatever the fuck. And then he attacks not Awesome Truth, rather. He attacks The Rock and aligns with Awesome Truth, throwing up the Too Sweet. In 2011, I was making the pitch for NWO coming back, because Kevin Nash was already coming out to the NWO music anyway, when he was feuding with Triple H at that point. Now, it would have been a poor man's NWO, with The Rock, not with The Rock involved, but rather The Rock and Cena maybe now in 2025. But with like R-Truth and The Miz involved, it doesn't exactly scream New World Order, but you would have had Kevin Nash involved a little bit to the ties to the original NWO. John Cena being the new Hogan, maybe throw in Triple H as the big corporate leader. That would have been fucking cool, and they didn't do it. Number 2 on my list also has to do with The Rock, so this kind of follows up on that. We get Rock and Cena 1 at WrestleMania 28. The build, for the most part, by the end of it, I was just exhausted of all the back and forth talk between the two, a lot of repetitive promos and, goofy jokes and whatnot, specifically on Cena's end. But I was excited for the match. The match, in my opinion, did deliver. I still very much, even in retrospect, enjoy that first Rock Cena match. It was great. Rock wins. Awesome moment. Why the fuck did we have to revisit it? I know it was always the plan to have Rock and Cena set up the match at 27, announce the match a year in advance, have Rock win the first one, which was not evident when it initially happened. It became evident after the fact when they were still hinting at a rematch that it was a Mania deal to do that whole series between the three, or between the two of them, and then have Cena go over in the end. Honestly, I'm not even disputing that finish where Rock loses to Cena at WrestleMania 29. You were not going to have Rock walk out of Mania still the WWE champion. That would have been completely fucking ridiculous. I would have done one of two things. The second thing is what I have here in the picture. But the first thing would have been Rock gets his championship match at the Royal Rumble against CM Punk, and The Rock loses. CM Punk retains the championship. John Cena, not because he likes Punk, but because he fucking hates The Rock so fucking much, he cost him the championship. And we get Cena Rock 2 at WrestleMania, and that is how you get to heel Cena. Punk was a heel at that point, but you could have turned Punk back babyface, which they did later on in 2013 anyway, if you really wanted the top babyface in the company. If you really wanted to avoid that issue, you could have done that. But anyway, the second option would have been waiting until WrestleMania itself to turn Cena heel, which would have been a WrestleMania-worthy moment anyway, where Rock and Cena have their god-awful match. The only thing that would have made that match worth it was Cena turning on Rock afterward. When Rock and Cena, the only thing you could have changed, and I was still holding on for a shred of fucking hope at the very end of that match, where the match ends, and then Rock and Cena embrace each other. They just basically just made out and fucking... He could have bought him dinner first before doing what he did at the top of the ramp. I kid, but my whole point is that you could have done that exact angle, but Cena turns on Rock. That would have been fucking incredible. There was no reason to look forward to whatever came after WrestleMania, after Cena beat Rock. It was Cena's first world title win in a year and a half, and that was kind of refreshing a little bit, but it felt like no time passed. Rock was going away anyway. Just have Cena turn on The Rock. No reason to do a rematch, a best-of-3 series. God forbid, that would have been awful. The second match was bad enough. I liked the first match, but the second match was complete garbage. You could have turned Cena heel, and instead of turning Ryback heel, which is what they ended up doing the next night, because Cena had no real compelling challengers, you had Ryback being very over at that point. You can laugh at that idea, but Ryback was the top guy at that point. Punk you could have turned soon after as well. Run back Cena and Punk with him, Cena being the heel this time, Punk being a babyface. They dropped the ball on that opportunity. That would have made WrestleMania 29 so much better in retrospect. And again, they did not do it. But speaking of Cena and Punk, that brings me to number one on my list, the Summer of Punk 2011. Now, a lot like with the Authorities lost to Dolph Ziggler and that amazing moment at Survivor Series 2014, I don't want to jeopardize one of the greatest moments in WWE history here by suggesting that Cena should have beaten Punk in Chicago at Money in the Bank 2011. So I'm not saying that event specifically, but whether it was before Money in the Bank, probably either at the event itself or soon after, you could have done a double turn with Punk and Cena. They turned Punk babyface anyway, thankfully, because people were already starting to like Punk and he was organically over and he was a massive star and whatnot. It made sense. But on the Punk front, though, he was a made guy. If anyone was going to come close to surpassing Cena as the face of the company and being organically over in that spot in the 10 plus years that John Cena was on top, Punk was that guy. Punk was that person. And they ended up turning Punk anyway babyface, which was great, albeit for a year, because they needed the top heel. And, Punk knew he would take a shot as a heel as far as take a hit merchandise-wise and whatnot. He's talked about this on podcasts before. But he was rivaling John Cena's merchandise numbers, if not surpassing them. That would have been the time to turn John Cena heel. That, to me, is the ultimate missed opportunity. The event itself would have been perfect because people fucking hated Cena on that show in Chicago. That crowd loathed John Cena. It was one night stand 06 levels of hate. They did not like John Cena. The match was obviously amazing and whatnot. You could have done a double turn on that show, and it would have been sick. Punk could probably still walk out as the WWE champion, but I always go back to that moment where Vince and John Laurinaitis attempted to do like a Montreal Screwjob type angle and helping Cena win the championship. What if he allowed that to happen? I mean, you probably wouldn't have done Cena turning heel and then Punk beating him anyway. That kind of would have been goofy. But in the immediate aftermath of that show, you could have turned Punk heel. Or I'm sorry, not Punk heel. That would have been dumb. Turn him babyface, but then gradually turn John Cena heel, whether it be at SummerSlam in the rematch or like the next night or something like that. Because people forget about the stipulation where if Cena lost to Punk in Money in the Bank, he would have been fired. And then right before he was fired on Raw the next night, Triple H came out, became the on-air like COO and whatever. People forget about that. But what if Cena was like the heel foil for Punk for when he came back and John Cena pulled out the ultimate heel move anyway? When he beat Rey Mysterio, the same night that Rey Mysterio won that tournament to become WWE champion, beating Miz in the finals, John Cena stepped in like a fucking asshole and beat him for that belt like an hour and a half later. Like, what an asshole. That, to me, and a lot of people, was when John Cena turned heel. And you could have turned him heel that night. You could have turned him heel at SummerSlam and not rushed the entire thing by bringing back Punk as quickly as you did. A lot of different directions they could have gone in with the Summer of Punk. And again, that's its own story in its own right. But as far as turning John Cena heel, that to me would have been the time and place to do it. There's probably some other instances I'm forgetting to mention, but those are my top 6. I appreciate you guys checking out this near 30-minute video talking about all the opportunities where I would have turned John Cena heel. So be sure to let me know in the comments where you guys would have turned John Cena heel and your thoughts in this upcoming heel run for John Cena in WWE. I don't know if it's going to be as great as it probably could have been 10, 15 years ago. And all these other times they would have done it and could have done it instead. And it does mean more now because it's been longer that he's been a babyface. I get it. I'm just skeptical that the follow-up will be worth it. And hopefully it is. But anyway, thank you guys so much for checking out WrestleRant Ranks here on the channel. Check out the other episodes down below in the description box. And we'll be right back here next Monday with another all-new episode. Until then, guys, I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.